So it sounds like you're servicing people that are providing alternative treatments to various mental health issues. And you mentioned eating disorders, anxiety, depression. You mentioned working with ketamine clinics and other psychedelic clinics. Can you talk a little bit about what that landscape looks like?
Yeah. So the typical patient journey for a mental health patient is pretty crazy in the US, as you could imagine. Most people will for a while go undiagnosed, as there's still a lot of stigma, there's still a lot of access problems. I read a stat that on average multiple years before someone first seeks help for a mental health condition. And when they do, they typically go to their PCP, so their primary care physician, who is great, probably hasn't been trained to help treat mental health conditions. And so at that point, they might start taking a drug, or they might start trying therapy. And with the drugs, like for antidepressants like SSRIs, it usually takes 6 to 12 weeks to even tell if something is taking effect. And that's just like a huge amount of pain and suffering for someone to go through if they're already really feeling down in the dumps. And then this person might try multiple types of therapies if that's not working. And then at that point, they've probably seen a psychiatrist at this point, and that psychiatrist may then refer them out, or they might hear on their own to try psychedelic medicine or try neuromodulation, like things like TMS. And some of these more alternative therapies, things like ketamine, FDA-approved psychedelic medicine, which is hopefully on its way, and types of brain stimulation. So I mentioned transcranial magnetic stimulation, ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy. These are all much more invasive forms or intensive forms of mental health treatments that are typically reserved for patients who have failed multiple lines of other types of treatments, but have pretty high effectiveness rates, studies have shown. And in the US, like ketamine is definitely a really quickly growing field. From what we've seen, at least, it's probably doubled in size every year in terms of the number of practices. At least now that we know right now, I think probably 700 or so ketamine practices all around the US. And these are standalone clinics. And a lot of them are really excited about FDA-approved psychedelic medicine coming down the line. So I think a lot of them are also opening up in anticipation of being able to administer MDMA and psilocybin-assisted therapy as well.
What was your personal experience there? It sounds like you followed a similar path to what you described, where not necessarily seeking out help for a while and then going down the traditional path where people may or may not be as educated about the different solutions that are out there. So what was that journey for you?
So for me, it definitely took me a while to seek help, and it's super tough. And I think a lot of us have good support mechanisms. A lot of us have not so great support mechanisms. And even then, it's just so hard to overcome that initial stigma and self-realization. And then for me, I had been struggling with an eating disorder for a while. And after many years of just being in denial, I finally decided to go to therapy, which is a really huge step for me. And I'm glad it's now becoming more and more mainstream. And that really helped a lot. I think that when just thinking about my life in different ways and finding purpose in other areas of my life really helped me overcome it all in all. But I definitely do think that there are some people where therapy might not be enough, and that's totally okay. That's not anyone's fault. It might just be the way that we're biologically wired or environmentally affected. And there is going to be a subset of the population with more treatment-resistant conditions or more severe mental illness. And again, that's totally okay. And that's just the nature of how our bodies and our brains work. So I do wish at the time I'd known more about, for example, they're studying ibogaine for addictive disorders, for things like eating disorders. And it'd be really interesting to have tried that. But I'm excited about those new therapies presenting hope for things like eating disorders or things like substance use disorders or more, general mood disorders.